Hi, everybody. It's Jean Humbrecht with Humbrecht Law, criminal and traffic defense attorney here in Manassas, Virginia. I also now am the town prosecutor for the town of Occoquan. So I have a lot of interesting questions I could ask my special guest today. I'm joined by Chief Doug Keene, who is chief of the Manassas City Police Department. And in celebration of National Traffic Awareness Month, he's going to be answering questions that I have and anybody that's watching has about traffic issues in the city and just in general. So, Chief Keene, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell everybody a little bit about what you do and the Manassas City Police Department, anything special you want to share, and then we'll just start asking questions.
Great. Thanks, Gene. And I hope I get the prosecutor side, not the defense side of you today. So Doug Keene with City Manassas Police Department. I've been with the city for going on 34 years, and I've been your chief now for going on 14 years. So it's been a great ride here. Very embedded into the city. Love the city, but traffic is one of the hottest topics I deal with. So this should be very interesting and informational for those that watch it either on your channel and or catch it on ours. I think my staff may be recording it or whatever they do with that.
Oh, okay. Well, it will live on. So if people miss the live version, they can always watch the recorded version later.
Okay.
So the first question that I wanted to ask, I guess, if you can tell everybody what, in your opinion, what the biggest traffic concerns would be for the residents of Manassas City.
Well, speeding is the number one concern I get from our residents. Traffic enforcement is the number one request and has been for the entire time that I've been chief. It is the most often thought of residents. It's the most questions I'm asked, and it's also the most requests I get. That is expanded from where it used to be, which was speeding in my neighborhood, to now a more request of, hey, we have these speeders on these commuting routes as people are going to or from work. Loud exhaust has been one of the really big ones over the last few years as people modified their exhaust. And then the aggressive driving that people display and see. It seems like our patience on the roadway is not what it used to be. And so I hear from our residents about all those.
Okay. Now, when you say aggressive driving, can you explain to anyone watching what that might entail?
Yeah, so the complaints I get are the more excessive speeds, tailgating, cutting people off, weaving in and out of traffic, running people off the road, those types of complaints.
Well, running people off the road, that's a pretty big one.
It is. Yeah, we get more than you would expect of, hey, I had to swerve off onto the curb or into the turn lane to keep from being hit or slam on my brakes because this car was coming no matter what.
Now, would you say that traffic infractions and behavior like that is increasing or decreasing, or does it kind of remain steady over the years?
Statistically, it's increasing. We wrote more tickets in 2022 than we have for the previous 5 years. And that's also during a time when our staffing was down, but it was, my philosophy is community based. So if it's what our community's asking for, we need to focus on that a little bit more. So I asked my staff to focus on those traffic concerns. Sorry, my phone is ringing. And so we did a little bit more of that. There's also some state initiatives, Gene, where DMV will give us grant funds so officers can come in at an overtime rate, and their entire focus is on traffic enforcement. And then we have to report those statistics back to DMV, and that includes seatbelt usage and what the charges were. So the state tracks that a little bit as well.
Okay. Now, in terms of speeding, where in the city do you see this the most? My guess would be 28 coming through Old Town, but I could be wrong there.
No, so it's those, I'm going to call it the corridors that are the commuter corridors. We've clocked speeds up to 75 and a few and 80 miles per hour. Um, Noakesville Road, as you said, coming into the city from the south side, Godwin Drive between Noakesville Road and Sudley Road, and
Mhm,
Sudley Road as well, in front of the hospital,
mhm, mhm,
are the big ones in the early morning. When I say early morning, that 5 to 6 a.m. time frame, when traffic is not as heavy, and they can get up to high speeds. Liberia Avenue
mhm, mhm,
is another big one. And Liberia Avenue over the last probably 12 to 18 months, getting complaints from residents about late going into nighttime speeds or the 9, 10 o'clock at night of just really excessive speeds that
mhm,
they're seeing on Liberia Avenue. So when your posted speed limits are 35, 45 miles per hour, and you're starting to get that 75 or 80 mile per hour range, extremely dangerous.
mhm,
In fact, we had a fatality this year in that corridor of Centerville Road going towards Manassas Park.
mhm.
The investigation is still ongoing, but the initial part of it is two cars racing from the traffic light and then collided side impact with a car going into the shopping center.
Oh, which shopping center was that?
That's the junction right there where Tony's Pizza
Oh,
is at.
okay.
So that was a fatality. One of the passengers was killed in that accident. So a lot of those complaints, for some of the side impact and accidents that we work, Liberia Avenue is the biggest traffic accident corridor uh, in the city.
Mhm,
Those intersections come in the top 10 for the number of accidents every year. But we did put photo red light enforcement there.
mhm.
And the funny thing is tickets are going up in those locations, and but accidents went down. So they did work because we reduced the number of accidents, even though the number of tickets have risen. Over 20,000 tickets for photo red lights.
Wow.
It's a lot of red lights being ran. And I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, but our some of the listeners may not be. Is that is recorded. So if you're on the receiving end of that ticket, when you get that, there's an actual video attached to the ticket that you can view. It will tell you your speed and the delay. The light was red 4 seconds before you went through it. It will give you all that data.
Oh, well, so that's really interesting because people sometimes say, well, how can they prove it was me driving and that's not my car? Well, it sounds like they can.
Yeah.
So,
Well, so the tickets go to the registered owner, not the driver.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
But yeah, but some of the listeners may not. So, but some of the conversations I've had with people when they will call me, hey, I stopped at that intersection, and I usually ask them, did you watch the video? And they go no, and I'm like, go back and watch the video, and that will tell you your speed and how long the light was red. And I've never gotten a phone call back from anyone, and some of them are friends and relatives. Like pay your ticket after you watch it. No one's ever come back to me and said, "Hey, it's wrong," because
Mhm,
it goes through 3 levels. Gene, the vendor screens it, then a second level at the vendor screens it, and then a sworn law enforcement officer, one of our staff, is the final approval on those tickets. So those things get viewed 3 times before the ticket is actually issued.
mhm. And I did want to ask you, I'm glad that you brought up the cameras. We've been noticing a lot more of the cameras around Manassas City. So has there been a recent increase in those cameras? And do they all record, or some of them just take photos? Can you explain those to us?
Sure. The intersections that we only have 4 intersections with the photo red light cameras.
Okay.
So the other cameras that you see posted on the traffic lights is from our streets and traffic safety division of the city. That's connected to them so they can monitor the traffic at those locations and alter signal times if they need to. We
Okay.
don't use those. Those are strictly for the streets department. They do not record. They are live so that they can see the live action. The photo red light, as we stated earlier, does still photos and video for those. So the most recent intersection is Center and Grant in Old Town, is the newest one that we've added. Everything else is on the Liberia corridor. So there's a process you have to go through before you can even get approval for those by VDOT. And you have to do a traffic study, you have to do an accident study, and see the violations and sight lines, and try other methods before you go to the photo enforcement. So we put all that into the formula to determine if they're even necessary. And then we make that determination. So that's where we're at right now with those. We may expand upon that depending on accident rates at other intersections as they begin to increase. We'll do an evaluation to see if they can be there. So it saves lives, in my opinion, if it can reduce the number of accidents. Then you're not using a real person tying their time up there as well. So, and then the newest, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, you get me started, right? And then I just go, you know that. And then the newest thing that we're doing this year with the videos is the Commonwealth approved photo enforcement in speed zones during school times. So we have added those to 3 of our schools, Round Elementary on Hastings, Dean Elementary on Wellington, and Metz Middle School on Wellington as well. So this is the first year that was approved, and they were up and running. They only do enforcement during school zone times, so it's time to the lights, and that was just in the news. Fairfax had problems, and it was issuing tickets outside of that school zone time, so they have to go back and do an audit on theirs and confirm it's working correctly. And we do that on a regular basis. We're just starting the school year, but we did some test runs. They were working properly, and then the first 30 days, those are just warnings because we're really looking for compliance to try to get people to reduce their speeds.
Is speeding around the schools in Manassas City a big problem?
Well, from the data that we got before we installed these, we would say yes, especially in those 3 areas. So those 3 areas are also 4-lane roads, right? So all 3 of those schools, there just doesn't seem that, again, if schools around those commuting times, it just seemed like we were not getting compliance. Even when we had marked cruisers and officers working, the rate of violations was so high. We felt that this would be a good method to try to get compliance. We did a lot of public service announcements, letting people know that. We also, I don't know if you remember, those speed limits were also in front of Metz at one point were 15 miles per hour during school times, to try to be consistent, because really what we're looking for is compliance, right? To get those speeds down. We actually increased the speed back up to 25 during school time, but then added the speed cameras, because if we can just get people to do 25, we'll be happy. So a lot of thought goes into it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And so when someone gets a ticket from those cameras, because people are going to want to know this, is that going to be, if they pay that, is that a point violation? Are they going to get points on their license, or is it just a fine?
It is just a fine. It's just like a parking ticket. So it's not connected to a driver. It is connected to the registered owner of the vehicle, but there's no tracking of it there for their driving record or anything else. So we get that question a lot because a lot of cars are either rental cars, leased cars, or company cars. So it goes back to the company. Listen, I've got some of my own cruisers in those cameras. The officers pay those tickets. They pay the $50. Emergency vehicles have gotten it. City vehicles. So there's no ethically, there's no scrubbing of those. It's very important to us that the public knows that anybody that goes through those are going to get the ticket unless there's an emergency. So for my staff, if they have their blue lights and siren on, that picks it up. Of course, we void the ticket. But if they're just going through without an emergency equipment, we track down which officer was driving the car. That officer pays the ticket. They're not happy about it, but we make them.
Of course not.
No. So I think, one of the changes I believe in the future we may need to talk to the General Assembly about is, we have one person that's 20-some photo red light tickets. How do you track that person or that car down if they're not paying those tickets? Because they wrote the code that you cannot take any action on the owners for that. So I think they need to change that. And I understand that it may be someone else, not the owner, driving the car. But it seems like we could do something there. Maybe you can't renew the registration until those tickets are paid, or there needs to be something there. And if you recall, there was a case in Maryland recently where there was an accident and someone was killed. It was a fatality, and the striking vehicle had, I think it was over $10,000 worth of photo enforced tickets that they've never paid.
Wow.
Because there was nothing they could do with it. So, the person kind of we knew they weren't a good driver, but there was no action because it was all on photo enforced tickets. So I think in the future, after I get a full year of data and run that, I think it might be something we as a city may want to talk about our state elected officials about, giving us a little bit more bite into that for the unpaid tickets.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I thought that if people just ignore those tickets, it'll eventually, hit their credit. I mean, they will eventually get some sort of suffer the ramifications of that, but maybe that just takes too long.
Well, it's too long, and it's not necessarily cost effective for the vendor that actually runs it for us. They would just rather just write it off than go after the violators. So there's a set fee for each one of those cameras. So they don't get a portion of each ticket. They get a flat fee for each camera. So all they care about is once they get that amount of money, they're not going to go after anybody as long as they're getting their fees paid every month. So I think there's some things for us to look at. How's that? To consider in the future anyway. And most people do. Don't get me wrong. I think most people, they either come to court and challenge it, or they pay their tickets. But you have that small percentage, as I know, one of ours had 20-some tickets at the same intersection at the same times within 10 minutes every morning. It just seemed like he ran that red light every morning at 5 o'clock. So actually had a staff member that waited for the person because they saw that, and then they got a real ticket.
Oh.
Officer, not a photo ticket. So
yeah.
So we were able to track that down, and in that specific case, the person's registered address was different than where they actually lived. So they weren't really getting any of those tickets because they were going to the address on the registration.
Mhm. Well, that is why it's important for everybody to comply with the law and update their address when when they move and update their registration and all that, because you could be unpleasantly surprised one day
Yeah.
when you find out that you have all this and you just didn't update your address with the DMV. And depending on what it is that you do, that excuse might not fly. So that you didn't know.
Yeah.
I was trying to leave this mostly to you instead of me giving legal advice.
Well,
um,
I think it's the conversation, right?
yeah,
That's what this is about today.
yeah. But I wanted to ask, well, I wanted to talk specifically about Manassas City because that's where you were the chief and that's where I live and work, and it makes sense. And I think a lot of people that are watching this are local. But I also wanted to ask if the trends that you're noticing in Manassas City, if you know, are they throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia? Are they throughout the country?
Well, through Northern Virginia, at some of the meetings and through the Council of Governments around DMV, the District, Maryland, Virginia, we have these conversations. So what we are seeing here in the city is consistent with the region. The excessive speeds are becoming a problem around the region. Driving behavior, poor driving behavior would be a better way to say it,
Mhm.
seems to be on the rise. Um, People fleeing from the police with these excessive speeds seems to be on the rise as well. Um, so it's nothing new, not different. It's not isolated to the city. I think it's a concern. We've seen DUIs on the increase in the region as well. Um,
Mm.
I don't know what I've tried to put some thought into it. The last few years, staffing shortages in law enforcement um,
Mhm.
doesn't allow for as much enforcement action. Maybe people are not seeing law enforcement on our roadways as often as they did before. So they think, yeah, there's not enough policemen out here. I don't know what it is. That's all kind of philosophical things that I've thought about. Maybe because staffing levels do impact the ability of the agency to have, I call it that non-directed time, the free time to be able to do enforcement actions.
Mhm.
And that's true with us here as well. Gene, is if we're on a busy night or evening, those officers are going from call to call. They don't have time to
Mhm.
go do enforcement action on Godwin Drive.
Mhm.
So that's where those DMV grants are very important, because our traffic services section, the motorcycle officers and one car, um, they're really here during the day because that's when school's in. They help with the school crossings as
Mhm.
well. So they're doing a lot and running from place to place.
Mhm.
So nothing new in Manassas seems to be the trend, but
Mhm.
we're 10 and a half square miles. So, and we're very engaged with our community. I know you're very involved. So you and I hear these things when we go out and talk at events and just talk to people.
Mhm.
Even walking around Old Town at the one of the many events that
Mhm.
we have, I'll get residents that just come up to me or store owners that are complaining about the excessive speed or the excessive noise,
Mhm.
especially in Old Town. And if you follow our Facebook page, we just did a Old Town campaign where the traffic officers were down there just writing tickets in Old Town, and it surprised me with the number of violations they have. Uh,
Hmm.
and they are writing a lot of tickets for, let's talk about handheld, their phones.
Mm.
We are writing a lot of tickets for people on their phones and poor driving behavior while they're doing it.
Mhm.
And we are pretty passionate about that. We had one of our female officers a number of years ago, the first year that it came into law, was hit in July and had to retire Officer Heather Munsterman, pretty severe injuries, but she had to do a disability retirement because of the injuries, and the person was on their phone that struck her. So it's something that weighs heavily on us here, and we try to make sure that we don't forget that.
Hmm. I know I see it all the time. People with their phones in plain view. I mean,
Yeah,
right up there by the steering wheel. I mean, you can see what they're doing. And obviously, you're not paying attention to the road if you're looking at your phone. And a lot of people still don't know that the law recently changed. It used to be texting while driving. Now it's just holding a device that
yeah,
essentially, for time purposes, a phone, a television, a video game console, anything that you can send communication on, email. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If it's in your hand while you're driving, that's an infraction, and it's mandatory fine of 125, I think, the first time, and mandatory fine of 250 the second time, because it is dangerous. Frankly, I don't understand why it's not charged as reckless driving more. I personally haven't seen the use of a phone be the basis for a reckless driving charge. Do you do you or your officers ever do that?
no, I think they're going straight phone charge. And I know some of our surrounding jurisdictions have actually gone to um, unmarked SUVs or pickups to do specific charges with that because they set up a little higher,
Mm-hmm.
and that way they can see the people that think they're fooling everybody by having it below the window line, but you can see them like this, and they're driving with their knees or their elbows while their thumbs are moving 100 miles an hour, texting and driving. So, but you're right, and you get a lot of leaning against the window on their phone. As you said, it's holding the device now, and
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I think is becoming an issue, especially with some of the accidents. Being able to prove it is hard, but I think it's a huge contributor.
Oh, I'm sure that it is. And with the ability to connect your phone to the car audio, you can just respond to a text that way. You can call without having to touch anything. I mean, I know some cars are more technologically advanced than others, but just with what we have available to us, there's no need even to touch it, you know, and or just wait until you're not driving to respond. So.
Yeah, so you're right. Almost every car today has Bluetooth capability. I'd be surprised if there's any that don't. But
Mhm.
even some of our older cruisers do not. So actually, our insurance carrier, which is through VML, um, they actually bought us the portable Bluetooth devices to put in our cruisers to attach to the sun visor, so officers would have the capability to have phone access but be
Mhm.
compliant of the law. So even the city's insurance company, just trying to reduce those opportunities for people to do it.
Mhm. Now, why is that increasing, the holding the phone while driving or texting while driving? Or is it just there are more accidents, or why is it that you specifically have officers out looking just for that? I would guess it's going up.
Yeah, it's going up. I don't think there was a lot of enforcement
Okay.
on it. So I think we're getting specific enforcement on it now. And I know that's one of the things that our staff here are writing more tickets for that. So I
Mhm.
think we're just getting more comfortable with it. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier. I think law enforcement is recognizing as well as that uh, almost every car today has the capability. And I've talked to a couple of my officers, and they are almost identical to what you were saying, Gene. Is they were like, I wrote 5 tickets for that today, and every one of the cars, I'm like, they ask them, why don't you go on your Bluetooth? Oh, because I was texting, I wasn't talking. So it's still you still get a lot of people that just want to text and not even make the phone call.
Mhm.
So I think it maybe learned behavior. I'm not sure. Be a good study for a university.
It would be. It would be. Um, But you can text, you can voice to text into the car Bluetooth, just like you were making a phone call.
Yeah, that's the reason I said I think it might be learned behavior, right? It's a habit. People make fun of me all the time because I'll actually pull over and turn my blue lights on uh, if there's something I need to do. Sometimes just if I'm in a very serious conversation, or if I need to send some text. And I'm laughing about it because a few times some of my officers pull up and they're like, "Hey, Chief, everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm on the phone on a pretty serious conversation. I just felt it was better I pull over." They laugh at me and go about their way, but I appreciate them, checking on me. But
Hmm.
it's just something I recognize that I'm not paying attention to my driving the way I should because of the conversation. I just need to pull over and be safe.
Hmm.
Um, um, so I think it's just something we have to get comfortable doing.
Hmm. Yeah. So if I'm hearing you correctly, the reasons for the increase in speeding and for the phone violations are probably due to what the civilians view as lower police presence, and they just think that they can just get away with it. I guess. Am I correct in stating it that way?
Well, you would be surprised at the number of people. Let's talk about the handheld device, right? As a good example, I think what you just said is true. If somebody's on their phone and then they look over and they see me in a uniform or a marked car and they immediately put the phone down, that tells me they know they're doing something they shouldn't have done, right?
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
just didn't recognize there was an officer nearby. And I do believe, even for us, those unmarked cars and for the region, when law enforcement has purchased these unmarked SUVs, um, it's for that specific reason. It's giving the ability to do some of these enforcements that otherwise maybe people would be more compliant with.
Hmm. Now, after obviously in the beginning of the pandemic and shutdown, there were very few cars on the road, but after a while, we kind of got back to normal. So, did you notice any difference in patterns or increases or decreases during the pandemic when a lot of things were shut down?
Um, yeah, well, needless to say, the photo red lights, we didn't implement that program until afterwards for that reason. I mean, there was just no cars on the road.
Uh-huh.
Um, so one of the things as a region, when I say region, the DMV and specifically Northern Virginia, we're still tracking those traffic counts.
Hmm.
Uh, Really, what you just said, that data, as people are still now just returning to work and the federal government trying to increase that, right? To
Hmm.
make people get back in the office. We're seeing more cars on the road and we're seeing more violations, more accidents coming as we're getting more and more people going back to work.
Hmm.
So I think you're right. I think one could easily make the link that there's more people coming back on the road since the pandemic, and
Hmm.
that's a contributor to the statistical data.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, like for our, we when we do our annual report, we track our accident by location, day of week, and time of week. So, I mean, we really try to dive down to say, Center and Grant between 4 and 7 p.m. on Friday nights is when the most accidents happen. So let's try to get some enforcement or a presence. It's not
Hmm.
always about enforcement. Sometimes it's about getting a marked police car there, right?
Hmm.
We dive down pretty deep to get that data so that we can be very pointed on our actions to try to reduce accidents or speeding or whatever the case may be,
Hmm.
because studies have shown as well just the presence of that marked car will make people automatically slow down or
Hmm.
or stop for a traffic light they may have tried to squeeze through
Hmm.
before. So we use a lot of methods. It's not always about the enforcement side. It's about the presence. At least just trying to get people to slow down and think about what they're doing,
Hmm.
and just make our roads safer.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's what it all comes down to. It's safety. It's not the goal to write X number of tickets. It's to cut down on accidents and make sure that kids can cross at the school crossings without cars speeding by. So,
Yeah, yeah, Gene, you're exactly right. I would much rather have my staff not have to deal with that. Put us out of the business. Put us out of traffic enforcement business, you know, just because there's not, and let us spend our time engaging with the community or driving through our neighborhoods so people feel safer in their community. Um,
mhm,
that would be a great place to be.
mhm. Well, so we talked a lot about traffic and the cameras and the enforcement and the presence of officers,
Yeah.
specifically about traffic, but is there anything else that you wanted to mention? Anything that you see going up or down in the city or anything that citizens in the city are concerned about?
Yeah, I think if council sees this before I get a good chance to talk to them about it. But you were with me a few weeks ago at the midday when I talked about the perception of crime going up. From our residents, when the data is telling us that crime here in the city has actually gone down.
Mhm,
So again, talking about the region, and I got a wooden desk and I'm knocking on it because I don't want to jinx myself.
mhm,
In the region, crime is on the rise, but here in the city of Manassas, crime is actually down compared to last year. That's down by the first quarter, down the second quarter, and down year to date. And we got it to the latest numbers. I try to track it because of what's going on around us. And even up until the 15th of this month, crime is still on the decline here in the city. So that is really good news,
mhm,
but it's one of those things that we have to constantly uh, battle, fight, message out because the perception is it's on the rise. And at the end of the day, if people don't feel safe, doesn't matter what's really happening. The perception is they don't feel safe. Crime's on the rise. We've got to make sure we let them know and get it out there that no, actually, it's really safe here in the city, and
mhm,
our crime is actually on the decline so far. That could change, right? We still have almost a half a year to go, almost 4 months left. So you could have some spikes that change that, but what we're seeing right now is very positive.
mhm. I have two questions about that. One, why do you think that is? And two, why do you think it is that it's going down? Because that's a good thing. We want to make sure it stays that way. And two, why do you think people have a perception that it's on the rise?
I think they have that perception by what's in the media, in the news. So two things: um, there's the city of Manassas zip code 20110. Then you have the Manassas region, right?
Mhm.
That's all of Prince William County, moves further out. Um, so if they hear a crime and it says Manassas, they automatically think it's the city of Manassas,
Okay.
and it's not. So, as an example, not that there's a lot of crime there, but Manassas Mall. People believe Manassas Mall is in the city of Manassas.
Mhm.
It's not. It's basically one block into
Mhm.
the county. Godwin Drive is the city county jurisdictional line. So that's part of it. The other one is, again, I talk about our academics and studies from them. Uh, if you believe in the broken windows theory, um, which is, if you can take care of the smaller crimes, it'll reduce more serious crime. So our crime is down, but our arrests are up. Crime's down, but arrest is up. But those arrests are up for smaller violations, most of them being drugs and alcohol, substance abuse, and small petty crimes. So historically, a very controversial broken windows theory that it doesn't work, but some believe it does. I think it's um, really what you want to believe. Well, what the data tells you. So are we arresting the people that would be committing more violent or serious crimes before they have the opportunity, because we're arresting them before they got the opportunity to do that? Would be a philosophical question. Um, I don't know if you can ever really determine that. Uh,
Hmm.
the outcomes in the data would say there's a connection between the two, and I do believe, as a police chief, there is a connection between those two. If you it goes into if you have a dumping site where people dump used tires, if nobody ever addresses that, then people begin to believe that it's okay to dump trash and tires there. So you keep getting more and more people dumping tires there. So you got to clean it up. That's the broken windows theory. Clean it up. Let people know if you dump tires there, you're going to get charged and go to jail. So that's to be determined. We don't know that, but I do think there's a link to it.
Hmm.
I think the other thing, if you don't mind, you asked a pretty broad question.
Did.
So I think the other thing that we're dealing with is, and you've seen it in the news, and some of our Prince William and Fairfax elected leaders just had a town hall. We are getting a lot of questions about the panhandlers,
Hmm.
both on public property and private property. So how we handle those are differently. Private property is up to that property owner to let us know they don't want the person there. So if it's on private property in a shopping center, if that shopping center says, hey, I don't want that person on our property doing that, then we can issue a trespass notice. You're
Hmm.
not allowed to come here and partake in that activity. The Supreme Court has ruled on public property that it's considered free speech. However, safety can come into play. So, as an example, Centerville in Liberia, one of our highest traffic points, one
Hmm.
of our highest accident locations, it is not safe for people to panhandle at that intersection. So, we can move them off of there. Um, is what we've tried to do. It's always a constant battle. They're going to keep coming back and going to the place where they get the most money,
Hmm.
and usually where they get the most money is where they get the most contacts.
Hmm.
So there's a lot that goes into it. So I can't just come onto your office complex and enforce that unless you want me to.
Hmm.
So
Well,
I'm sorry,
It,
go ahead.
it's good. It's good that you made that distinction. I did hear you say that a few weeks ago, but a lot of people might not know that. They could just think, well, this person shouldn't be here. The police should come and get rid of him. But if the property owner says it's fine, then it's fine.
Yeah, so from the law, there's no difference between the Girl Scouts selling their cookies at the shopping center and John Smith holding up a sign saying "I'm homeless,
Hmm.
give me money." It's the same. They're both asking for for services from somebody or money. So, and we've had shopping centers that, right. I give permission for the Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or whatever organization to be on our property and sell that. I don't want John Smith harassing every one of our customers that comes into our store asking them for a dollar.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they have the right. They have the right to make that decision. It's their property.
Hmm. And then also, I believe, because you mentioned safety, if a person who is panhandling actually steps out into traffic, that's when the police can also get involved, right?
Yeah, we can. Again, we really spend a lot of time um, engaging with the person, trying to find out, are they truly in need of other services, right? Are they truly in need? Is there mental health issues or their addiction issues? Is there homelessness issues? And then we can work with them to get them connected with the right service. Maybe they need to talk to a nonprofit group. Maybe we need to get them over to social services. Maybe we need to get them to the mental health board. So I'm very proud of the work our staff does of spending the time to try to find that, is there a need for this person
Mhm.
that they're not getting or don't know about that we can
Mhm.
help them with and get them out of this situation.
Mhm.
There's other people that, nope, that's how they make their living. I make
Mhm.
my living by doing this. I'm not going to go to work. I'm gonna go out here and work the corners.
Mhm.
That way I don't have to work. And you have a mix. So trying to understand that and get those that need help or want help the help they need.
And so what you just said is it makes me think of something going back to the reduction in crime. And my question that I'm about to ask could probably take 6 hours, but if you could quickly answer it, if you have an answer, do you think that the trend in the recent years of trying to provide mental health in lieu of jail in appropriate circumstances, or veterans dockets, drug courts, more courts are doing that lately? Do you think that that is having an impact on the reduction in the serious crime that you had mentioned?
Yes, I do. I am a believer in that. So I think part of that depends exactly what you said. How serious is the crime? Right? If it's a violent crime
Mhm.
against someone, that person and that family needs justice as well. Right? They need justice. However, if we're talking about shoplifting, petty larcenies, those things. And again, if the court can mandate, which is what part of that is, right?
Mhm.
The court can mandate mental health services, addiction services, and it keeps the person. It gives again a little bit of a bite, right? Now they're forced to go get the help.
Mhm.
So really comes down again to philosophical belief. What is the benefit? If we can make that person a productive member of society where they're contributing now, that's a win for all of us,
Mhm.
right? Because jail is horrifically expensive. I mean, I don't think most people realize the cost of incarceration to our taxpayers.
Mhm.
And I also think so. I think finally, the criminal justice system, so that's the law enforcement side, our prosecutors, our defense attorneys, and our judges have all realized there's probably a better way to do business with some of these cases, right? Um, and we're all working together, and no one's screaming that they're being misused. And then our jail is also one of the best jails in the Commonwealth, and they do a great job, even for someone who gets jail time, for their rehabilitation of giving them job training,
Mhm.
health
Mhm.
services, or addiction services. Our jail is really, really good, extremely professional.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think all of that helps. Again, the bottom line is we want people make mistakes. If they can learn from it, come out and be a productive member of society, that's what we want.
Mhm. And like you said, you never know what underlying issue there could be. There could be substance abuse, there could be mental health, there could be a combination of things. So if there's a way to help get the person those services, not only are you going to take care of whatever crime was being committed, but you're going to get that person back on the right path and to be, a contributing member of society and have the help that they need.
Yeah. I'm a big proponent of the veterans docket. That's kind of where this thing started with our young men and women that had served overseas in some very bad conditions, exposed to a lot of that, and then the PTSD that went with it. And then they get out of the service and they're just kind of put right back out there without any help. Um, I'm very pleased that our court has done that and given them opportunities to force them to get some help. and thankful for the many nonprofits that are willing to work with them as well.
Mhm,
And it's really good to see everybody coming together to help them out.
mhm. Yeah, the veterans specifically in Prince William County, and a lot of counties actually, it is quite new. Some counties have been doing it longer than others, but it is new in Prince William County, and the drug court is new in Prince William County. I went to an open house, a training type of a session that they had, and learned a lot of really good information. And they're intensive programs, but the service that they provide and the help that they try to give to the defendants, because you're charged with a crime, and then there's an agreement as to what's going to happen after you complete that program, whether it's a dismissal or a reduction, because it's not like every case is just dismissed. That's not the way it works.
Right.
Obviously there's some sort of incentive, for somebody completing the program. Not only do they get the help that they need, they can, avoid having this mistake, like you had mentioned, potentially ruin the rest of their life. So, so I think it's great. It's a lot of work on the person, but I so far have not heard of anybody in Prince William County. I'm sure this isn't. I'm sure somebody has been removed, but I have not heard that anybody has failed to complete the programs, or had a significant problem where they had to be removed. So my point is, overall, they're working. I think they're working very well from what I have seen from my perspective.
I would agree, and I'm glad you pointed it out because I think it's important for your listeners to hear. This is not a free pass.
Hmm.
Basically you kick the can down the road on what the outcome of the case is going to be, and you give that person an opportunity to complete all the programs that you talked about. So that was very important distinction. I'm glad you pointed that out to it, because there's people that are going to think, oh, they got a free pass. No,
Right. Yeah. No.
they did not. No.
No. And they have to get drug tested. They have to comply with the mental health or substance abuse or alcohol abuse, whatever their issue was going into that specialty treatment docket. They have to get help.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it. So yeah, it's not a free pass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, see, in the beginning, before we went live, I was talking to Chief Keen about what we were going to discuss, and I said, "Oh, I'll just think of things, and we'll have a conversation." And here we are, almost an hour. I thought of so many things that we can discuss. Chief, I know you're so busy, and I really appreciate your time, but I would love to have you back on again. Maybe we can talk
Absolutely.
about something a little more specific, so I don't take an hour of your day.
No, I enjoyed it as well. I think these are great opportunities, Gene. I appreciate you having me on, but I do prefer this format, right? Because it kind of flows with what's on our mind and what comes up. And again, whenever you want us back, we'll make arrangements. Would love to get back and just keep tackling these little
Mhm.
topics, because there's going to be different things that come up for you or that you may hear about from your listeners. They're like, hey, get that guy back on there and ask him this question, and we'll be glad to partner with you.
And maybe in my new role, it will, the more I'm in court doing that, it will cause me to have additional questions that I didn't have before.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so before we go, the first thing I want to say, Chief, is that when I end the broadcast, you and I will still be here, but we just won't be live anymore. So you
Okay.
chat for a second. But is there anything else that you want to leave our listeners with, a message from the department or anything?
Yeah, I try to tell everyone this. Our community are the first line of defense, so to speak. They are the eyes and ears of our community. If that'll saying, if you see something, say something.
Mhm.
If something doesn't seem right, give us a call. Let us come investigate it and check it out for you. It's going to make them feel a little bit more at ease. Don't hesitate to call. We'll let us come and make sure everything's okay for you. But you never know. They may have the information that solves a crime. It may seem very minor to them, but it may be just that missing piece for us to be able to make the connection to solve a crime for someone.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I think sometimes people might see someone in their neighborhood that looks suspicious, or they don't belong there, or they're doing something, and they're like, well, I don't know if I want to bother the police because they might not be doing anything. So I'm glad that you said that. So you would say err on the side of just call so that you guys can make sure that everything's okay.
Yeah, we get I hear about ring. See, we're going to keep going. It's going to be.
But no more questions. I'm done after this.
So let me answer it this way. We get people that have a lot of cameras on their homes now,
Mhm.
right? And I've talked to people, they're like, oh, yeah, I was watching my camera footage, and at 3 o'clock in the morning, I saw these three guys with hoodies go through my backyard and through the neighbors, but they didn't stop and do anything. So I didn't let you guys know. And I'm like, well, do you still have it? Because 3 blocks over, we had cars broken into.
Mm.
Those may be the guys that were doing it. So those little things, it's always important for them to let us know. Let us come take a look and investigate it for you.
Mhm. Well, I'm glad that we ended on that, because that's another question I didn't think to ask about. So it's good that everybody heard that, so they can call, like you said, see something, say something.
Yeah.
So, Chief, I want to thank you very much for your time and for all of the information. I know that everybody who watched this now and who's going to watch it later, because a lot of my viewers watch it later, is going to really appreciate all the information. This has been great. I knew some of the things we talked about, but I didn't know everything. So I really do appreciate your time, and hope to have you back another time. And I'm sure I'll see you around Manassas soon.
You will. Thank you, Gene.
All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.